Resuming debate, the honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Madam Speaker, this motion is about an application that was supposed to cost $80,000. But instead, Madam Speaker, it ended up costing $54 million. And furthermore, Madam Speaker, a group said of experts that they could have created this app for $200,000 in a weekend. But what this app represents, Madam Speaker, is so much more than the app itself. It represents the level of government bloat that we have come to see under this costly coalition. It represents the lack of transparency that we've come to expect from this coalition. And most of all, Madam Speaker, it reflects the serious situation that Canada finds itself in now of inflation and the cause, inflationary spending. Madam Speaker, as you know, the bank rate started this year at 0.25%. It recently, as you know, has jumped to 3.75%. And it's true, Madam Speaker, that there have been some external factors which have contributed to this rate hike. Of course, there is the oil price spike, which began with the recovery of demand after COVID and was made worse by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That was one of those external factors. Also was China's hyper-restrictive COVID lockdowns disrupting international supply chains. But there's been a consensus, Madam Speaker, that the main reason for this inflation is inflationary spending by this costly coalition. Now, Madam Speaker, there was also another article recently published by one of my favorite economists, Jack Mintz. And in this, he points to a study of the U.S. Federal Reserve last July. And it concluded that countries with the largest spending binges tended to have much higher inflation rates. So this is not something that is unique to Canada, Madam Speaker. It's something that has been seen as a trend, but certainly something that this costly coalition is guilty of. We know, Madam Speaker, that Canada's headline inflation rate eased to 6.9% from a peak of 8.1%. But food costs are still accelerating and underlying price pressures remain sticky. At the same time, as I mentioned, the Bank of Canada hiked interest rates by 350 basis points in just 7 months, Madam Speaker, one of its sharpest tightening campaigns ever to try to force inflation back to what was supposed to be a 2% target. And unfortunately, the bank last week signaled its tightening campaign was nearing its peak, but made clear that it was not done yet as it hiked rates by a 50 basis point to a fresh 14-year, Madam Speaker, 14-year high. Madam Speaker, the average family will spend $3,000 more next year as a result of these inflationary effects. Food inflation, Madam Speaker, is at a 40-year high. Grocery prices have been raised by 11.4%, and interest rates are going up. Energy costs are up 100 to 150%, some even 300%. And winter is coming, of course, Madam Speaker. Mortgage payments, groceries, fuel, consumer goods, it's all gone up. Now, Madam Speaker, again, we talk about what other nations are doing, and there are other nations which have managed to fare much better than Canada. Japan, Switzerland, Taiwan, and Hong Kong have all managed to keep their rates below 3%, Madam Speaker. And you know what? Other nations, Madam Speaker, are providing tax relief to their citizens. 51 other national governments have provided some form of tax relief. That includes more than half of G7, G20 countries, 2/3 of these countries in the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. They found at least 25 countries are choosing to provide tax reliefs at the pump. Australia cut its gas tax in half. The United Kingdom announced billions of dollars of fuel tax relief. The Netherlands cut gas tax by 17 cents per liter, Madam Speaker. South Korea cut its taxes at the pump by 30%. India cut gas taxes to keep inflation low, thus helping, Madam Speaker, the poor and middle classes. But instead, the Prime Minister is also choosing to take more money from Canadians' pay. If you make $65,000 this year, Madam Speaker, the federal government is taking nearly $4,500 directly from your pay through Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance taxes. Your employer is also coughing up an extra $4,800. This year, the annual payroll tax bill, including employer and employee payments, by $818 for each middle-class worker increased. And over the past decade, 7 of which this government has been in power, Madam Speaker, it increased by $2,435. Madam Speaker, our peers are choosing to reduce income taxes. We believe high taxes reduce incentives to work, said UK Chancellor of the Exchequer, Kusie as he announced payroll tax relief. Down under, the Australian government said that by putting more in their pockets, families will keep more of what they can earn, allowing them to spend more on what they need, as is provided by permanent tax cuts of up to $2,500 and for individuals in 2022-2023. 18 countries, including Belgium, Germany, and Norway, chose to save their citizens money by reducing consumption taxes, Madam Speaker. So as you can see, Madam Speaker, many nations, which I have named, have made the choice to provide tax relief to Canadians. This costly coalition, this Liberal NDP coalition, Madam Speaker, has not chosen that. And guess what, Madam Speaker? The numbers are in. Canada ran a $90.2 billion deficit last year, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that deficit is equivalent to almost $2,400 per Canadian. And at the rate of, wait for it, $172,000 of new debt for every single minute of the fiscal year, Madam Speaker, not a small amount. It also means Canada's total debt now stands well north of $1 trillion. And as of March 31st, the Government of Canada also had an accumulated deficit of $1.13 trillion, Madam Speaker. And we wonder, where's this coming from? Well, the Auditor General says there are $500 million in overpayments to civil servants that need to be collected, Madam Speaker. And a new report from Canada's Auditor General said that 28% of civil servants in its sampling had errors in their pay. 28%, Madam Speaker. If a government can't even handle the payroll, why should they handle our nation's finances or even our country for that, Madam Speaker? Another example, Madam Speaker, of this wasteful spending. $12 million to Loblaws for new fridges. Madam Speaker, where are Canadians at with this, Madam Speaker? Well, I will tell you. 47% of respondents in a survey of Canadians felt their finances had worsened over the last year. 53%, Madam Speaker, believe that we will be in a recession next year, and even worse, 30% believe that we are in a recession right now, Madam Speaker. So Canadians have long forgotten the sunny ways of the NDP Liberal coalition. But, Madam Speaker, the good news is that relief is on the way. Relief is on the way with a Conservative government where we pledge no new taxes. We pledge the pay-as-you-go system. For every new dollar of spending, we must find a new dollar of savings, Madam Speaker. So you see, this motion today, Madam Speaker, isn't just about a $54 million application that was supposed to cost $80,000 that experts say that they could have made for $200,000. It's about much more than that, Madam Speaker. It is about how this NDP Liberal coalition lost their way and how they need to stop the taxes and stop the inflationary spending. Now, stop. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just looking for a little clarification, and perhaps the member can help. The very first result, whereas clause in the motion says, the cost of government is driving up the cost of living. The NDP, when I asked them about this, said that that was referring to oil subsidies, but what I heard the Leader of the Opposition and the finance critics say this morning was that there were more and more government employees that were being hired, and that's what they were being critical of. I just want to make sure the NDP know what they're voting for here. Can this member confirm in that first whereas clause, are we talking about are we talking about oil subsidies there, or are we talking about more and more federal employees that have been hired?
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you very much to my colleague from Kingston and the Islands for that question. Well, it's true, Madam Speaker, numbers have come back, and there actually has been a significant number of increase of full-time equivalents, without a doubt, and in fact, even more than was planned as originally. And the unfortunate thing, Madam Speaker, is this has been without the improvement of services to Canadians. Canadians are still waiting for their passports. There's still incredible backlog in our immigration system. So this government is clearly not up to the task. This Liberal NDP government is clearly not up to the task of not only reducing spending, but spending and getting results for Canadians, Madam Speaker.
And comments? The Honourable Member, l'Honorable Député.
The Honourable Member for Thérèse de Blainville. Thank you, Madam Speaker. There's a part of the speech that I agree with. First of all, saying that on a part of the motion, the idea of casting a light on the astronomical amounts of money spent on ArriveCan, an application that received more complaints than positive reviews. We denounced the fiasco of this application, which cost a fortune, and we have to cast a light on that, of course, but I am concerned in these times where people are in need. We are probably in an imminent recession. There will be an economic statement on Thursday. Helping the most vulnerable, helping our 65-year-olds and up. Workers are being abandoned. Why not talk about that? There is an ensemble of questions, social questions that should be raised, services that should be strengthened. Is this the kind of measures that the Conservatives are ready to support or not?
For Calgary-Midnapore.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for that question. For me, it is eminently clear that we agree with regards to transparency, of course. I also believe that we agree with the notion that this app cost far too much. But I believe that the most important aspect is that we need to have value for money. And that is what we cannot see right now. Value for money is not something we can see. So we agree on transparency, yes, and I imagine that we agree with the fact that we need value for money. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Time for a brief question. The Honourable Member South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'll try to be brief, but there was so much there that I wanted to get into. One is the idea that if you cut gas taxes at the pumps, that will help people. The member's own provincial government in Alberta tried this, and for a week, that price went down relative to what it is in British Columbia. A week later, the gas companies had pushed it back up to where it used to be. So it was cutting government income and saving nobody any money at all. And secondly, when it comes to the debate we had last week, the NDP has asked the Conservative to support their idea of cutting the GST on home energy and they refuse, instead fixating on a carbon tax that will go up by 2 cents a litre in April, saving nobody.
Sorry, there's not enough time. The honourable member used the whole minute, so I'll allow the honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore to answer.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Everyone's fuel prices went up as a result of commodity prices, and the reality is that as long as this Liberal NDP coalition, of which the member is a part of, continues to spend, inflationary prices will continue to increase across all goods and services, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.